The Eltharian dreadship Vorax Claw dominated the void like a leviathan, its jagged silhouette a testament to its destructive purpose. The ship seemed alive, its pulsating conduits glowing faintly with purple bioluminescence, as if breathing in the cold, lifeless expanse of space. Beneath it, the charred remnants of the Earth colony smoldered against the planet's darkened surface. Smoke curled into the atmosphere, carrying with it the bitter tang of ash and death. A war cry had been answered, and it had brought annihilation. General Zhiraleth stood at the prow of the command bridge, her imposing figure framed by a viewport stretching across the chamber. The stars beyond twinkled coldly, indifferent to the suffering below. Her deep purple skin shimmered faintly under the biolights of her biomechanical exosuit. The chitinous armor molded to her powerful form was etched with silver sigils, each a chronicle of her conquests. Amber eyes, fierce and unblinking, surveyed the devastation below. "Report," she commanded, her voice resonant and sharp. It cut through the air like a blade, leaving no room for hesitation. One of her lieutenants, a sinewy Eltharian soldier, bowed low before responding. "The human resistance has been extinguished, General. Their defenses were formidable, but ultimately futile. Survivors have retreated to the outer sectors. Shall we deploy the hunting squads?" Zhiraleth raised a hand, silencing him. "No. Let them scatter and tell their kind what they faced here. Fear spreads faster than fire." The lieutenant nodded, though his mandibles clicked in what might have been disapproval. He dared not voice it. Few survived questioning Zhiraleth's methods, and none survived questioning her authority. Yet as she stared down at the wreckage of the human colony, a faint unease prickled at her thoughts. These humans, so fragile and primitive compared to her own kind, had resisted far longer than they should have. Their strategies, while clumsy, had moments of brilliance. They had forced her to adjust her plans, not once, but twice. That had not happened in years. The name Elias Vance had appeared repeatedly in intercepted transmissions. A human strategist capable of disrupting her flawless record intrigued her, though she would never admit it aloud. Her amber gaze hardened. Curiosity was a weakness, one she had eradicated long ago. The Emperor demanded obedience, strength, and results. Anything else was irrelevant. Elias Vance crouched behind a bulkhead deep within the labyrinthine corridors of Vorax Claw. The air reeked of something organic, an unplaceable blend of oil and decay. His team, 4 soldiers who had followed him through countless impossible missions, moved silently behind him. Each carried the weight of a lifetime of war on their shoulders, but none more so than Elias. Every step reminded him of the stakes. There was no backup plan, no escape route. If they failed, their deaths would be nothing more than another statistic in the Eltharian conquest. "Commander, we've got movement," whispered Corporal Mira Ortega, her voice crackling faintly through the comm. Her dark eyes darted toward the corner of the corridor. Mira was the team's scout, a wiry woman with reflexes that bordered on superhuman. Elias nodded. "Hold position, let them pass." The clanking footsteps of Eltharian patrol units echoed through the hallway. The aliens moved with unnerving grace, despite their insectile forms, their segmented legs clicking against the metal floor. Elias held his breath as the patrol passed within meters of their hiding spot. One soldier paused, mandibles twitching as if sensing something amiss. Elias tightened his grip on his plasma rifle, his heart hammering against his ribs. After a tense moment, the patrol moved on. Elias exhaled slowly, motioning for his team to follow. "Let's move. The Corps won't wait for us." The mission was simple in its objective, but nearly impossible in execution. The Eltharian Data Core housed critical information, fleet movements, command hierarchies, and the schematics of their dreaded weapon systems. With it, the Earth Alliance might finally have a fighting chance. Without it, humanity's resistance would crumble within weeks. They reached the central data chamber without incident. The room was a stark contrast to the sterile corridors outside, its walls lined with pulsating conduits that glowed a sickly green. In the center stood the data core, a crystalline structure suspended within a magnetic field. It hummed faintly, radiating an ominous energy. "Ortega, cover the entrance. Leanne, secure the perimeter. Stone, with me," Elias ordered. His team moved with practiced efficiency, each member fulfilling their role without hesitation. Elias approached the core, his fingers flying over the alien console. The interface was incomprehensible to most, but Elias had spent years studying Eltharian systems. He bypassed the encryption protocols with a mix of intuition and skill, his movements precise and unyielding. "Downloads at 20%, he said, his voice low but steady. The alarms blared without warning, their piercing wail reverberating through the chamber. Red lights bathed the room in an urgent glow. Elias cursed under his breath. "We've been made. Ortega, report." "They're coming in fast," Ortega replied, her voice taut with tension. "We've got maybe 30 seconds. Hold them off. Stone, help me finish this." The first wave of Eltharian soldiers burst into the room, their plasma rifles spitting searing bolts of energy. Ortega and Leanne returned fire, their shots precise but desperate. The air filled with the acrid tang of ozone and burning metal. 70%, Elias muttered, his hands moving frantically over the console. One by one, his team fell. Ortega went down first, a bolt catching her square in the chest. Lean followed, his cry of rage cut short as he was overwhelmed. Stone, the hulking combat specialist, held the line until the end, his defiance a fleeting spark against the tide. The download completed as the last of his team hit the ground. Elias grabbed the data core, his jaw clenched in grim determination. He fired a shot into the console, ensuring nothing could be recovered by the enemy, and turned to run. He didn't make it far. Eltharian soldiers tackled him to the ground, their claws pinning him with inhuman strength. One struck him across the face, and darkness claimed him. Elias awoke in chains, his head throbbing and his vision blurred. The cold metal floor beneath him was a stark contrast to the heat of his bloodied skin. He blinked against the harsh light of the command chamber, forcing himself to focus. General Zyralith stood before him. Up close, her presence was overwhelming. Her purple skin glistened faintly, and her amber eyes burned with an intensity that seemed to pierce his very soul. She studied him with a mixture of disdain and curiosity, her lips curling into a faint, humorless smile. "You're Elias Vance," she said, her voice low and resonant. It wasn't a question. "And you're Zyralith," Elias replied, his voice hoarse but steady. "The Emperor's executioner." Her smile widened, though it held no warmth. "You've caused me considerable trouble, human. Tell me what makes you think your resistance matters. Your kind is weak, fragile. You fight a war you cannot win." Elias met her gaze without flinching. "Weakness isn't in the body, it's in the mind. And your empire doesn't understand that." Her eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Hope," he said simply. "You can crush our bodies, destroy our worlds, but you can't kill hope, and that's why you'll lose." For a moment, Zyralith said nothing. Something flickered in her expression and emotion she couldn't quite name. She stepped closer, her towering form casting a shadow over him. "You amuse me, Elias Vance. Perhaps I'll keep you alive, for now." As the guards dragged him away, Elias turned his head to look at her one last time. Despite the pain and exhaustion, he smiled. It wasn't defiance, it was hope. And for the first time, Zyralith felt something unfamiliar stir within her. Doubt. Elias Vance sat slumped in a chair bolted to the cold floor of the Eltharian command chamber. His wrists and ankles were secured by sleek restraints that glowed faintly with alien energy. Despite his battered appearance, his face streaked with dried blood, his uniform-torn eyes remained defiant, watching every move the alien general made. He wasn't just a prisoner, he was an unyielding reminder of human resistance. General Zyralith stood before him, her tall, elegant frame outlined against the pulsating bioluminescence of the walls. Her purple skin shimmered faintly under the chamber's soft light, and her amber eyes burned with an intensity that made most beings falter. She was dressed in a ceremonial version of her battle armor, a layered suit that combined alien metals and organic plating. Her presence filled the room, not through volume or movement, but through the sheer weight of her command. "You humans are remarkably stubborn," Zyralith said, her voice a low purr with a sharp edge. She circled him slowly, her steps purposeful and quiet. "It's almost admirable, almost." Elias raised his head, his lips curling into a faint smile despite the pain radiating through his body. If it bothers you so much, you could always let me go. Zyrolith's lips curved slightly, though it was not a smile. It was the kind of expression a predator might wear before pouncing. You mistake amusement for mercy. There's a thin line between the two. She stopped directly in front of him, her glowing eyes narrowing as she studied him. Tell me, Elias Vance, why do you resist? Your kind is fragile, your weapons primitive, your resources laughable, yet you fight. Why? Elias straightened as much as his restraints allowed. Because we have something worth fighting for. You wouldn't understand, wouldn't I? Her tone turned icy. She leaned in, her gaze locking onto his. I have seen countless species resist the Eltherian Empire. They all say the same thing. We have something worth fighting for. Yet in the end, they burn. Their worlds crumble, their legacies vanish. Hope dies. Yours will too. Elias chuckled softly, though it cost him. His ribs ached with each breath. Hope doesn't die so easily. That's what you don't understand. You think you can crush us, but hope doesn't rely on survival. It's stronger than that. It's what keeps us human. Zyrolith tilted her head, her expression unreadable. She stepped back and clasped her hands behind her back, her tall frame casting a shadow over him. Hope is a delusion, a weakness. It blinds you to reality and ensures your destruction. Hope isn't a weakness, Elias said, his voice steady. It's a force. It's why my team followed me onto your ship, knowing the odds. It's why they died fighting instead of running. And it's why I'm still sitting here, talking to you instead of begging for my life. Zyrolith's eyes flickered with something and emotion she quickly buried. They died because you led them into a trap. Their hope was misplaced. No, Elias countered sharply. They died for something bigger than themselves. And if that terrifies you, maybe you're not as certain of your empire's strength as you pretend to be. The room fell silent. The hum of the alien restraints and the distant sounds of the ship's organic mechanisms were the only noises. Zyrolith stared at him, her amber gaze unreadable but unwavering. For the first time in years, doubt pricked at the edges of her thoughts. His words carried a weight she hadn't anticipated, striking at the foundation of her beliefs. You speak as though you've already won, she said at last, her voice softer now, though no less dangerous. You haven't. Maybe not today, Elias said, but you'll lose eventually. Empires like yours always do. The question is whether you'll see it coming, or if you'll be too blinded by your own arrogance. Zyrolith's fingers tightened behind her back, her claws scraping against the alien metal of her armor. You are bold, I'll give you that. Reckless, but bold. Better than blind obedience, Elias said, leaning forward as much as his restraints allowed. Why do you fight, General? Is it loyalty? Fear? Or do you actually believe in this empire that devours everything it touches? She stiffened, her jaw tightening. Careful, human. You tread dangerous ground. I think I'm right, he pressed. You're too smart to follow orders blindly. So why do you serve an empire that destroys everything? What do you believe in, Zyrolith? Her name on his tongue startled her more than his question. No prisoner had ever dared speak her name so casually, so fearlessly. She turned away, her hands clasping tighter as she paced the room. You presume to know me, she said, her voice quiet but sharp. You know nothing of what I've endured, what I've sacrificed. Then tell me, Elias said. If you're so certain of your cause, tell me why you're here, why you're not the one chained to this chair. She stopped and turned, her eyes glowing brighter. For a moment, she considered striking him, silencing his voice. But something stayed her hand. Instead, she leaned in, her face inches from his. You will remain alive, she said, her tone cold but measured. Not because I believe your words, but because I want to see how far your hope will take you. Let's see if it survives what's to come. Elias met her gaze, unflinching. It'll outlast you, Zyrolith. The faintest flicker of a smile crossed her lips before she straightened. Without another word, she turned and left the chamber. The door sealed behind her with a liquid hiss, leaving Elias alone in the dimly lit room. As the silence closed in, he leaned his head back and exhaled slowly. The conversation had been a gamble, but it was a step. He wasn't sure if he had planted seeds of doubt in Zyrolith, but he knew one thing for certain: he had her attention. And for now, that was enough. The dread ship Vorax Claw hung in orbit like a predator watching its prey, its dark hull shimmering faintly against the planet's atmosphere. Deep within its labyrinthine corridors, General Zyralith walked with a calculated stride, her thoughts churning beneath her calm exterior. Her conversation with Elias Vance still lingered in her mind, uninvited and unwelcome. No prisoner had ever dared speak to her with such candor, and certainly none had forced her to question herself. As she approached the training hall, the biomechanical doors dissolved into liquid ripples, revealing a massive arena lined with Iltharian warriors in combat drills. The room smelled of ozone and sweat, and the sounds of clashing weapons echoed off the black walls. Zeralith needed the distraction. She had to remind herself of what she was: a warrior, a commander, a symbol of the Emperor's absolute rule. "General," said her second-in-command, Vorik, stepping forward and bowing his angular head. His silver-tinted exosuit gleamed under the pale biolights. "The warriors are ready for inspection. Shall I dismiss them?" "Let them continue," Zeralith said, her voice sharp. She stepped into the arena, her presence drawing the attention of every soldier. Their movements stilled, their gazes following her like iron filings to a magnet. "Carry on," she commanded, her tone brooking no argument. The soldiers resumed their drills, their bladed staves spinning in synchronized arcs. Zyralith's eyes swept over them, but her thoughts drifted. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. Doubt was a weakness she could not afford. Elias sat in his cell, the restraints around his wrists and ankles now deactivated but still attached. The Iltharians hadn't removed them, a calculated humiliation to remind him of his captivity. He stretched his arms carefully, wincing as the movement pulled at his bruised ribs. The door hissed open, and a soldier entered, pushing a tray of unidentifiable food toward him. The alien didn't speak, its black eyes unblinking as it regarded him with detached disdain. When the door sealed again, Elias leaned back and stared at the meal. It was a strange paste that smelled faintly of seaweed and copper. He grimaced but took a bite, his hunger outweighing his disgust. The taste was surprisingly bland, almost sterile. It reminded him of his first days in the Resistance, eating nutrient bars that tasted like sawdust. His mind drifted to his team. Ortega's sharp wit, Stone's booming laughter, Leon's quiet resolve. The thought of their faces twisted his gut, but he pushed the grief aside. Survival demanded focus, and he owed it to them to keep fighting. The faint hum of the restraints buzzed in the silence, a constant reminder of his vulnerability. But Elias wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Zyralith's quarters were stark yet elegant, a reflection of the general herself. The walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescence, the only light in the room aside from the faint glow of her armor as she set it aside. Beneath the exosuit, she wore a fitted underlayer that clung to her lean, muscular frame. Her purple skin gleamed faintly as she sat on the edge of a low, angular seat. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Her claws tapped rhythmically against one another as her thoughts churned. Elias Vance's words echoed in her mind. "What do you believe in, Zyralith?" The question was absurd, infuriating, yet it lingered. A faint chime pulled her from her thoughts. "Enter," she commanded. The door rippled open, and Vorik stepped inside. His silver exosuit gleamed even in the dim light, his posture as rigid as ever. "General," he began, his voice clipped, "the Emperor has summoned you for an audience." Zyralith straightened, her expression hardening. "The Emperor rarely calls without cause. What does he want?" Vorik hesitated. "There is unrest in the outer sectors. A faction of our people questions the Empire's expansion. They speak of alternative Sav coexistence." Zeralith's jaw tightened. "Traitors. Perhaps," Vorik said carefully. "But their influence grows. The Emperor wishes to ensure your loyalty in these times of uncertainty." The word struck her like a blow, though she kept her face impassive. The Emperor doubted her after everything she had sacrificed, every victory she had delivered? "Inform the Emperor I will come," she said, her voice cold. "And prepare my transport." Vorik bowed, his expression unreadable, and exited without another word. When the door sealed, Zyralith allowed herself a moment of stillness. The Emperor had been her guide, her purpose, for as long as she could remember. His vision of a galaxy under Yultharian rule had shaped her entire existence. But now, for the first time, cracks appeared in the foundation of her certainty. Elias didn't expect visitors, so when the door to his cell opened, he tensed instinctively. Zyralith stepped inside, her movements precise and deliberate. She carried no weapon, but her presence was intimidating enough. The glow of her amber eyes illuminated the dim cell as she approached him. "To what do I owe the honor?" Elias asked, leaning back against the wall. His tone was casual, but his eyes remained sharp. "You claim hope is your strength," Zyralith said, ignoring his question. "You cling to it like a drowning man clings to a broken raft. But hope will not save you. Neither will fear," Elias replied. "And between the two, I'll take hope." Zyralith studied him, her gaze unrelenting. "Why do you speak as though you understand us? You know nothing of the Yultharian Empire, of what it takes to maintain order in a galaxy of chaos." "Then tell me," Elias challenged. "Explain it. Enlighten me." For a moment, she considered the request. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, to maintain the distance that separated her from this human's maddening influence. But something compelled her to speak. "We are a species of strength," she began, her voice low but steady. "We thrive on order, on discipline. Chaos is weakness. Without unity, we fall apart." "And what does unity cost you?" Elias asked, his voice quieter now. "How much of yourself have you given up for this so-called strength?" Zyralith stiffened. His words struck deeper than she anticipated, cutting through the armor she had built around her mind. Without another word, she turned and left the cell, the door sealing behind her. As she walked back to her quarters, her thoughts churned. She had always believed in the Empire's purpose, in the Emperor's vision. But Elias's questions lingered, like splinters in her mind. How much of herself had she sacrificed? And what was left of the person she had once been? The Vorax claw moved through the void like a shadow, its sleek, jagged design absorbing the faint starlight. Within its living corridors, the ship pulsed with energy, a blend of alien engineering and organic precision. Deep in its heart, General Zyralith strode through the command halls, her mind a storm of conflicting emotions. Each step echoed her authority, but with every passing hour, that authority felt like a mask she was struggling to wear. The Emperor's summons loomed over her like a weight she couldn't shake. For years, his will had been her guiding light, her purpose. She had built her life around the idea that strength and order were the only truths. Yet now, cracks had begun to form in the foundations of that belief. The human prisoner, Elias Vance, was at the center of her doubts, his words persistent in her mind. "What do you believe in, Zyralith?" She pushed the thought away as she approached a tactical briefing room, the doors parting like liquid metal at her presence. Vorak, her second-in-command, stood waiting, his silver exosuit gleaming in the dim light. "General," he said, his voice clipped and formal, "our patrols report activity on Deck 4. It appears a group of human prisoners is attempting an escape." Zyralith's amber eyes narrowed. "An escape? How did they bypass our systems?" Vorak hesitated, his mandibles clicking softly in unease. The internal grid was disabled, but the breach originated from within. Sabotage, most likely. Her gaze hardened. "And you suspect me?" "I suspect nothing, General," Vorak replied, his tone carefully neutral. "But the Emperor has made it clear that loyalty must be absolute. Any deviation, intentional or otherwise, will be scrutinized." Zyralith felt a flash of anger, but buried it beneath her usual calm. "Then it seems I must deal with this myself. Have the corridors locked down. Seal all non-essential systems. I want this contained." Vorak nodded, but lingered, his piercing black eyes searching hers. "General, a word of caution. The Emperor values results above all. Ensure that whatever actions you take here reflect his vision." She didn't respond immediately. Her claws flexed at her sides before she finally said, "I know what is required, Vorak," dismissed. As he exited, she allowed herself a moment of stillness. The Emperor's gaze felt as though it were already upon her, even from across the stars. She inhaled deeply and straightened her shoulders before turning toward the lift that would take her to Deck 4. The maintenance corridors of the Vorax Claw were dark and narrow, the bioluminescent conduits flickering faintly along the walls. Elias Vance moved quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind him, 3 other humans follow Ada, makeshift team of survivors, who had seized a slim opportunity to escape. Their movements were cautious but determined, each step a gamble in the labyrinthine maze of the alien dreadship. "Hold up," Elias whispered, raising a hand. The group froze as a distant hum echoed down the corridor. He pressed himself against the wall, his makeshift weapon a jagged piece of metal clutched tightly in his hand. A security drone floated past, its sleek body scanning the area with rhythmic pulses of light. Elias held his breath, his muscles tensing. The drone paused for a moment, its lights lingering on their hiding spot, before continuing down the passage. "Clear," Elias said, exhaling softly. "Keep moving. Stay low." The group pressed forward, navigating the cramped tunnels with quiet precision. Every sound felt amplified, every shadow a potential threat. The ship felt alive around them, its organic systems throbbing like a heartbeat. It was unsettling, but Elias focused on the goal ahead. Freedom was close. He could feel it. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a tall, imposing figure. Zeralith stood in their path, her purple skin gleaming faintly in the dim light. Her amber eyes locked onto Elias with an intensity that made the others freeze. "You're predictable, Vance," she said, her voice low and sharp. "I knew you wouldn't stay confined for long." Elias raised his makeshift weapon, though he knew it was useless. "Get out of our way, Zeralith." A faint smile tugged at her lips, though it lacked warmth. "And where would you go? This ship is a fortress. Every corridor, every system answers to me. You're running toward your own execution." "Maybe," Elias said, his voice steady. "But I'll die on my terms." The humans behind him braced for an attack, their breaths shallow. Zeralith studied them, her expression unreadable. She took a step closer, her claws flexing at her sides. "You think you're brave," she said, her tone almost contemplative. "But bravery without strategy is just recklessness. You won't make it out of here alive." "Then why are you hesitating?" Elias asked, his gaze unwavering. "If you wanted to stop us, you'd have done it already." Her amber eyes flickered with something unspoken. Slowly, she extended a hand toward the wall, her claws gliding over the control panel. The lights in the corridor dimmed further, the hum of the ship's systems growing quieter. "What are you doing?" one of the humans asked, her voice edged with fear. Zeralith didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze back to Elias. "Covering your tracks. This way." The group exchanged uncertain glances, but followed as she led them deeper into the maintenance tunnels. The air grew heavier, the temperature dropping slightly as they moved farther from the ship's central systems. The tension was palpable, every step filled with unspoken questions. After several minutes, they reached a small chamber near the hangar bay. Zeralith gestured toward a sleek, organic vessel tucked into the shadows. "That ship is cloaked," she said. "It will take you to the outer sectors, far from the Emperor's reach." Elias narrowed his eyes. "And you? What's stopping you from alerting the Emperor the moment we're gone?" She hesitated, her claws flexing again. "The Emperor already doubts me. If I'm to fall, I'd rather it be on my own terms." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Elias lowered his weapon, though his guard remained up. "Why help us at all?" Her gaze met his, unflinching. "Because I've spent my life enforcing a vision I no longer believe in. Strength without purpose is emptiness. Perhaps your kind has something worth fighting for." The faint flicker of vulnerability in her voice caught Elias off guard. He studied her for a moment before nodding. "Then I guess we're on the same side for now." The other humans boarded the vessel, their expressions a mix of relief and suspicion. Elias lingered at the hatch, turning back to Zeralith. "You're risking everything," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "Now go, before I change my mind." As the ship's engines roared to life, Elias stepped inside, the hatch sealing behind him. Through the viewport, he watched as Zeralith stood motionless, her tall figure framed by the faint glow of the hangar lights. The vessel launched into the void, the vastness of space swallowing it whole. Zeralith remained where she was, her claws flexing one final time before she turned and walked away. For the first time in years, she felt the faint stirrings of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the possibility of something more, and for now, that was enough. The Dominion's wrath was not merely a ship, it was a declaration. Its spires clawed at the void, its hull radiated malevolence, and the energy veins coursing through its surface pulsed like the heartbeat of the Empire itself. Here, in this floating fortress, the Emperor's will was absolute. Even the stars outside seemed dimmer, as if bowing to its presence. General Zyraleth stepped into the audience chamber, her footsteps echoing across the vast expanse of the hall. She was accustomed to the grandeur of the Emperor's throne room, but today it felt suffocating. The walls shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed faintly, alive with the energy of the ship. Guards lined the perimeter, their weapons drawn but held in a ceremonial stance. The air was thick with tension, an unspoken promise of violence. At the far end of the chamber, the Emperor sat on his throne. His form was cloaked in shadow, his figure partially hidden by the folds of a shimmering black mantle that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Only his eyes were visible, burning, cold orbs of cobalt fire that seemed to see everything. The throne itself pulsed like a living entity, its tendrils curling around his figure, a physical manifestation of his control over the Empire. "Approach, General," the Emperor said, his voice resonant and cutting. It carried the weight of command, a tone that brooked no disobedience. Zyralith moved forward, each step measured and deliberate. She had fought countless battles, faced death more times than she could count, but standing before the Emperor now, she felt an unfamiliar unease. Doubt, a seed planted by Elias Vance's words, had begun to take root. "You have served me well, Zyralith," the Emperor began, his tone deceptively calm. "You have forged my will into the galaxy, crushed those who dared to resist, and built the foundation of our dominion. But recent events have raised questions about your resolve." "I remain loyal to you, my Emperor," Zeralith said, her voice steady, though the weight of his gaze pressed heavily upon her. "Loyalty is a fragile thing," the Emperor said. "It can waver, even in the strongest of hearts. There are whispers, Zyralith, that you have begun to question your purpose." Zyralith stiffened. "I question only how best to serve the Empire." The Emperor's eyes flared brighter, and the guards in the room tensed. "And yet, your actions suggest otherwise. You allowed a group of human prisoners to escape, including Elias Vancia man, who now carries information vital to the rebellion. You claim it was a tactical oversight, but I wonder, was it something more?" Zyralith felt a chill crawl down her spine. She had expected this confrontation, but the Emperor's words struck deeper than she had anticipated. "It was an oversight, nothing more," she said carefully. "The prisoner's escape will be dealt with. Vance will not remain free for long." The Emperor rose from his throne, the living tendrils of the seat receding as he moved. His towering figure seemed to darken the room, his presence suffocating. "Words, Zyralith, empty words. I require action." He gestured, and a side door opened. A group of Iltharian officers was marched into the chamber, their hands bound in restraints that glowed faintly. Their faces bore a mixture of defiance and fear. Zyralith recognized them commanders she had fought alongside, officers who had served under her command. "These traitors have conspired against the Empire," the Emperor said. "They seek to fracture our unity, to spread dissent among our ranks. I command you to execute them." The demand hit her like a blow. Zyralith's claws flexed, her mind racing. She had killed countless enemies in the name of the Empire, but this felt different. These were not rebels or insurgents. These were her people. She stepped forward, her voice careful. "If they are guilty, why not interrogate them? Extract the full scope of their treachery before passing judgment?" The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Do you question my orders, General?" "No," she said quickly, though the word tasted bitter. "I only seek to ensure the full extent of the rebellion is uncovered." The Emperor studied her for a long moment, his burning gaze unyielding. Finally, he said, "Very well. Interrogate them if you must, but their fates are sealed. Do not mistake this for mercy, Zyralith. You are as much on trial here as they are elsewhere." The cloaked ship carrying Elias Vance and his team emerged from its warp field, its sleek design gliding silently through the void. The humans aboard were exhausted, their relief at escaping Vorak's claw tempered by the knowledge that they were far from safe. Elias sat at the ship's control console, his fingers moving deftly over the alien interface. The ship was unlike anything he had ever piloted, organic yet precise, its systems responding almost intuitively to his commands. But its unfamiliarity made him uneasy. "Where are we heading?" asked Mira Donovan, the youngest of the group. She leaned against the console, her eyes scanning the star chart on the display. "A resistance outpost on the outer rim," Elias replied. "If it's still there, we'll refuel and regroup." "And if it's not?" asked Harlow, his grizzled face set in a grim expression. Elias didn't answer immediately. The truth was, he didn't know. Their survival felt precarious, their options limited, but uncertainty wasn't new to him. He had learned to navigate it, to find hope even in the darkest circumstances. As the ship moved through the void, Elias accessed the data core he had stolen from Vorak's claw. The encrypted files glowed faintly on the display, their contents tantalizingly out of reach. "What's in there?" Mira asked, her voice curious but cautious. "Answers," Elias said. "The kind that could turn this war around." Harlow snorted. "If we live long enough to use them." Back on Dominion's Wrath, Zyraleth stood in an interrogation chamber, the accused officers before her. The room was stark and cold, its walls lined with alien instruments designed for extracting truths. But Zyraleth didn't activate them. Instead, she leaned against the edge of the table, her gaze sharp. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why risk everything for rebellion?" One of the officers, a woman named Liren, lifted her chin defiantly. "Because the Emperor's vision is a lie. He promises unity, but all he delivers is fear and destruction. We've seen entire worlds burn in his name. If that's unity, I want no part of it." Zyraleth studied her, the word striking a chord she didn't want to acknowledge. "And what would you replace it with? Chaos? Anarchy?" "No," Liren said firmly. "Something better. Something built on cooperation, not conquest. You've seen it too, haven't you? The cracks in his empire, the cost of his vision." Zyraleth didn't respond immediately. Her claws flexed, the tension in the room thick. Finally, she said, "You're fools to think you can overthrow him." "Maybe," Liren said. "But if we die, others will rise. The Emperor's strength is a facade, and even you know it." The words lingered as Zyraleth left the chamber. The Emperor's command echoed in her mind, but so did the voices of the accused. For the first time in her life, she found herself standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. In the distance, the Emperor's voice called for her. But in the depths of her mind, another voice whispered a voice that sounded like her own, and it said, "Choose." The Dominion's Wrath floated in the endless void, a fortress of power and fear. Its massive hull bristled with weaponry, its living metal surface pulsing with energy. Inside, the walls of the Emperor's flagship seemed to hum with anticipation. The tension within its corridors was palpable, as though the ship itself sensed that something was about to break. General Zyraleth walked through one of these corridors, her footsteps deliberate but heavy. Her armor gleamed faintly under the bioluminescent glow of the walls. She had always carried herself with certainty, but today her movements were slower, weighed down by the choices she knew lay ahead. In her mind, the Emperor's words still echoed. "Cracks have begun to form. Do not let yourself be the fault line, Zyraleth." The interrogation chamber loomed ahead. Inside were the Yltherian officers accused of treason. Zyraleth had delayed their execution, claiming she needed to extract more information. The truth was, she wasn't ready to kill them. Not yet. Their defiance had stirred something within her, something she couldn't yet name but could no longer ignore. The door slid open, revealing the stark interior of the chamber. The three officers sat restrained in chairs, their faces a mixture of defiance and resignation. The leader, a sharp-eyed woman named Liren, met Zyraleth's gaze with unwavering resolve. "You've come to decide our fate," Liren said, her voice calm but edged with challenge. "What will it be, General? Execution or liberation?" Zyraleth stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. The hum of the ship's systems filled the silence as she studied the prisoners. Finally she spoke. Why do you rebel? What do you think you can achieve? Lyran leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. Because the Emperor's vision is hollow. He speaks of unity, but all he offers is submission. We want more than survival, we want to live. You've seen it too, haven't you? The cracks in his empire, the fear in his strength. Zyralith didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned to the control panel on the wall, her claws hovering over the holographic interface. If I release you, she said, her tone measured, will you tell me the full scope of your rebellion? Lyran smiled faintly. Only if you intend to join it. Far away, in the Resistance outpost hidden within an asteroid belt, Elias Vance stood in a cramped war room, surrounded by holographic displays. The data core's contents were finally decrypted, its secrets spilling out across the screens. Maps of Eltharian supply lines, details of fleet movements, and schematics of the Dominion's wrath glowed in the dim light. This is everything we need, said Kale, the Resistance leader, his sharp eyes scanning the displays. With this, we could cripple their supply chains, divide their forces, maybe even strike at the Emperor himself. It's a start, Elias said, his tone cautious. But it won't mean anything unless we can act fast. The moment the Empire realizes we have this information, they'll hunt us down. Kale nodded. Then we strike first. What do you propose? Elias leaned over the console, his mind racing. The schematics of the Dominion's wrath caught his eye, its intricate network of energy systems glowing faintly. We use their power against them. This ship isn't just a fortress, it's a hub. If we can disable it, even temporarily, it would send shockwaves through their entire command structure. Kale frowned. And how do you propose we get close enough to pull that off? The Emperor's flagship isn't exactly vulnerable. Elias hesitated, his thoughts drifting to Zyralith. He hadn't told Kale about her involvement yet, but the time had come. We have a potential ally on the inside. Kale's eyes narrowed. You mean the Eltharian general? The Emperor's enforcer? She's not what she seems, Elias said. She helped us escape Vorak's claw. She's questioning her loyalty to the Emperor. If we can reach her, she might be willing to help. Kale shook his head. Or she might be leading us into a trap. It's a risk, Elias admitted. But if she's genuine, she could be the key to turning this war around. Kale studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. Then we make contact. But if this goes wrong, it's on you. Back aboard the Dominion's wrath, Zyralith sat in her quarters, her claws tapping rhythmically against the edge of the desk. The interrogation with Lyran had left her unsettled. She had released the prisoners, citing their value as intelligence assets. But in truth, she couldn't bring herself to kill them. Their words had struck too close to the truth she had been avoiding. A faint chime interrupted her thoughts. The holographic interface on her desk lit up, displaying a coded message. Her claws hovered over the controls as she decrypted it. The message was short but unmistakable. Zyralith. It's Elias. If you're serious about standing against the Emperor, we need to talk. The Resistance is ready to act, but we can't do it without you. If you're in, meet us at the following coordinates. If not, this is goodbye. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected to hear from him again, but now that she had, a flood of emotions surged through Harreleaf, fear, and something she couldn't quite name. She stared at the coordinates, a location on the far edge of Eltharian space, far from the Emperor's reach. Elias and his team waited in a small chamber aboard the Resistance outpost. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the holographic display showing the asteroid field outside. Mira paced restlessly, while Harlow sat with his arms crossed, his expression grim. Do you really think she'll come? Mira asked, her voice filled with doubt. Elias leaned against the wall, his gaze fixed on the display. I don't know. But if she doesn't, we'll find another way. Before Mira could respond, the console lit up with an alert. Kale entered the room, his expression tense. We've got an incoming ship, Eltharian design. Cloaked. Elias straightened. It's her. The ship docked with the station, its sleek, organic design almost blending into the surrounding metal. The airlock hissed open, and Zyralith stepped through, her tall figure commanding the room. Her amber eyes swept over the group, lingering on Elias. You called, she said, her voice steady. Elias stepped forward. And you came. Zerlith's gaze softened, just slightly. I'm here because I've made my choice. The Emperor's vision is broken. If I can help you shatter it, I will. Kale stepped forward, his posture guarded. And how do we know we can trust you? You don't, Zerlith said. But if I wanted you dead, you would be. The room fell silent. Finally, Elias nodded. Then let's get to work. The Resistance began planning their strike on the Dominion's wrath. Zerlith provided critical intelligence, detailing the ship's vulnerabilities and the Emperor's routines. For the first time, the rebellion had a real chance to strike at the heart of the Empire. But as they worked, Zerlith couldn't shake the feeling that the Emperor already knew. His eyes, burning and unrelenting, haunted her thoughts. She knew the risks of betraying him, but for the first time in her life, she felt free. The tide had begun to shift. The galaxy, long crushed under the weight of the Empire, was starting to rise. And at the center of it all, Zerlith and Elias stood as unlikely allies, bound by a fragile but unyielding hope. The Resistance fleet emerged from the shadows of the asteroid belt, their ships maneuvering with quiet precision. Though smaller and less advanced than the Eltherian vessels, these crafts carried something the Empire's forces lacked: purpose. On board one of these ships, Elias Vance stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of their target, the Dominion's wrath. The Emperor's flagship loomed like a monolith in the void, its sheer size a testament to the Empire's dominance. Around it, a protective formation of smaller Eltherian warships bristled with weapons, their patrol routes tight and disciplined. The Resistance had no illusions about the challenge ahead. This mission was a gamble, and failure meant annihilation. Elias turned to the crew gathered behind him. Among them was Zerlith, her imposing figure calm but alert. Her presence had been a source of tension since her arrival. Even now, the Resistance fighters eyed her warily, their fingers never far from their weapons. But Elias had no time for doubt. "Listen up," Elias said, his voice steady but firm. "This is it. The Dominion's wrath is the linchpin of the Emperor's power. If we disable it, we disrupt their entire command structure. It won't be easy, and it won't be clean, but if we succeed, we give the galaxy a chance to fight back." Kale stepped forward, his expression grim. "And if we fail?" "Then we make sure our failure inspires others," Elias said. "But we won't fail. Not today." Zerlith stepped into the center of the room, her amber eyes sweeping over the gathered fighters. "The Emperor expects strength. What he doesn't expect is defiance from within. I know his ship better than anyone. Follow my lead, and we'll take him down." Her words hung in the air, met with a tense silence. Finally, Kale nodded. "We're with you, for now." Elias glanced at Zerlith, their eyes meeting briefly. There was no need for words. They understood the stakes. The assault began with a diversion. A squadron of Resistance ships darted into the perimeter, drawing the attention of the Emperor's fleet. The Eltherian warships responded immediately, breaking formation to engage the intruders. As the battle unfolded, the Resistance's cloaked strike team slipped through the chaos, heading straight for the Dominion's wrath. Inside the cloaked ship, the atmosphere was tense. Elias, Sheerlith, and a small team of fighters prepared for boarding. Sheerlith stood at the helm, her focus unshakable. She had provided the strike team with precise schematics of the flagship, detailing its vulnerabilities and the fastest route to the Emperor's throne room. "Once we breach the hull, we'll have minutes before they realize we're inside," Zerlith said, her voice firm. "Stay close and stay quiet. The Emperor will not underestimate us." The ship shuddered as it connected to the flagship's exterior. The airlock hissed open, revealing the cold, dimly lit corridors of the Dominion's wrath. The strike team moved swiftly, their footsteps silent against the metallic floor. The ship's organic walls pulsed faintly, as though alive, casting eerie shadows. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Zerlith led the way, her every movement precise. She knew this ship intimately, every turn and junction burned into her memory. The team encountered Resistance Eltherian soldiers armed with plasma rifles, but Zerlith dispatched them with brutal efficiency, her claws slicing through their armor like paper. Elias watched her work, a mixture of awe and unease filling him. She fought with a ferocity that reminded him of the enemy she had once been, But there was a purpose in her strikes now, a determination that transcended violence. The throne room was vast, its ceiling arched high above like the interior of a cathedral. The walls shimmered with shifting patterns of light, casting an otherworldly glow across the chamber. At its center sat the Emperor, his towering form shrouded in his dark cloak. His burning blue eyes pierced through the shadows, fixing on the intruders. "You dare bring your rebellion to my sanctuary?" the Emperor said, his voice a low growl that reverberated through the room. "Fools!" Xyrelith stepped forward, her claws flexing. "Your sanctuary is built on fear. It's time for it to fall." The Emperor rose from his throne, his cloak unfurling like wings. The room seemed to darken around him, his presence consuming the light. "And you, Xyrelith, my most trusted blade, you betray me for these insects? I served you because I believed in strength," Xyrelith said, her voice steady. "But your strength is hollow. It destroys without purpose, commands without reason. It is not unity, it is tyranny." The Emperor laughed, a cold, echoing sound. "Then you will die with them." He raised his hand, and the air around him crackled with energy. A wave of force shot toward the strike team, sending them scattering. Xyrelith dodged nimbly, her movements a blur. Elias rolled to the side, his weapon drawn. The battle was ferocious. The Emperor moved with unnatural speed, his attacks relentless. Energy crackled through the air, scorching the floor and walls. Xyrelith engaged him directly, her claws slashing in precise arcs. Elias and the others provided cover, their weapons firing bursts of plasma that barely seemed to faze the Emperor. "You cannot defeat me," the Emperor said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I am the Empire." "Then we'll bring the Empire down," Elias shouted, firing another shot. Xyrelith seized an opening, her claws striking the Emperor's chest. The blow staggered him, but only for a moment. He retaliated with a burst of energy that sent her crashing into a wall. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to stand. Elias moved to her side, helping her up. "Are you all right?" "I've faced worse," she said, her amber eyes blazing. "Keep him distracted. I have an idea." As Elias and the team continued to engage the Emperor, Xyrelith moved toward the throne. She accessed the control panel embedded in its base, her claws flying over the interface. The throne was not just a seat of power. It was the nerve center of the ship. If she could disable it, she could weaken the Emperor's connection to the ship's systems. The Emperor turned, sensing her actions. "You dare defile my throne?" Xyrelith didn't respond. With a final command, the throne's systems shut down. The ship shuddered, its lights flickering. The Emperor stumbled, his connection severed. Elias seized the moment, firing a shot that struck the Emperor squarely in the chest. The blow didn't kill him, but it forced him to his knees. Xyrelith approached, her claws poised. "You are finished," she said, her voice cold. The Emperor laughed weakly, his eyes still burning. "You think you've won? The Empire does not end with me." "No," Xyrelith said. "But it begins with us." With a swift strike, she ended the Emperor's reign. The aftermath was a blur. The Dominion's wrath fell into chaos as the Resistance fleet launched a final assault, capitalizing on the confusion. Xyrelith and Elias led the strike team back to their ship, escaping as the flagship crumbled. Back at the Resistance outpost, the mood was somber but victorious. The Emperor was dead, but the war was far from over. The Empire's forces were fractured but still dangerous. Elias stood with Xyrelith in the war room, the weight of their actions settling over them. "This is just the beginning," he said. Xyrelith nodded, her gaze steady. "The galaxy won't change overnight, but we've shown it's possible." They stood in silence for a moment, the stars outside shining brighter than before. For the first time, the galaxy had a chance, and for the first time, hope felt within reach.